Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Ah, I didn't see you there. Let's talk sports, shall we? Indeed. Hello everyone and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. Just a little bit of a comedy entrance right there as we go around the sports world as there's not a whole lot going on. Let's talk a little bit starting off about Monday Night Football. The Indianapolis Colts fall once again to an 0-2 start now for the first time in quite some time under Andrew Luck, who has been the prodigal son so far, very similarly to Peyton Manning, although Peyton Manning did struggle mightily in his rookie year, mainly due to the team that he was with. But they made a lot of offensive changes, and so far those offensive changes have just not worked out. Frank Gore is doing absolutely nothing in the run game for the Indianapolis Colts. Andre Johnson has yet to be targeted to his liking. He hasn't mentioned anything, but I would just have to believe that that is the case. And Andrew Luck just does not look like Andrew Luck so far. I think the Colts will turn it around. They're playing in a relatively weak division. Right now, the way things are playing out so far this season, it's looking like Tennessee will be their main competition within that division. But you can never truly tell because teams can come out of nowhere and have great seasons. And if you don't get off to a good start, which the Colts have not, then all of a sudden you're in a lot of trouble. But if they can tweak a few things, get a few things turned around, get Andrew Luck to protect the football a little bit. He's had a few issues holding on to the football, at least according to his coach. Then I think the Indianapolis Colts will be fine. That is going to be the big issue, though, for the Indianapolis Colts right now, because Chuck Pagano is apparently in a sticky situation all around. Not only is the team not performing, but his job security was called into question before the season even started. For some reason, he and the general manager apparently are not getting along. The owner is off tweeting somewhere. I don't know what he's doing about the situation. So it just brings all these questions up into the air. Pagano, all of a sudden, his security is not there. Will he be fired during the season if the Colts lose another game? Will something happen at the end of the season? That's almost assured, unless things really turn around and the Colts can get on a hot streak. And then it opens up another question. I saw it on the on ESPN's app. Apparently on the Dan Le Batard show, one of his co-hosts is predicting now that after only one season back in the college game, Jim Harbaugh would probably leave the University of Michigan to co-coach the Indianapolis Colts. He has history with Andrew Luck. He was his coach in college and did a pretty good job getting him Heisman hype and all that kind of stuff, and they had a great season together. So I think those two would work together. I would just like to see Harbaugh not do that. I know that he is that kind of person. That is as bad as the University of Kansas is right now. I am somewhat glad that they didn't hire Jim Harbaugh. Not that it was ever a true, what's the word I'm looking for, a possibility. I think it was rumored. I think Jim Harbaugh would have been interested had he been offered the job, but ultimately it didn't come to fruition, and I think that that's probably good because I think he would have gone to the NFL after 1 or 2 years. I think Michigan, I was hoping for their sake and for his sake, because I think he's a good college coach, but I was hoping for their sake that he would stay for quite a while because it's his alma mater. It's not really a situation to me that Jim Harbaugh, if he goes to the NFL, could just go back to Michigan if he didn't succeed. You've kind of burned that bridge a little bit. So I'd like to see him stay in college for a while. Obviously, Michigan fans would like to see him stay in college for a while. And just his style is better suited for college because you get all that turnover. In the NFL, I just think that he's going to always be like he was with the San Francisco 49ers, where he's a great coach. He gets players to play for him for a little while, and then all of a sudden you start burning them out on your style. It's not a style that is conducive to a long career in the professional ranks, simply because he just gets on too many people's nerves. And ultimately, I think that would cost him. I think he needs to stay in college where he's more appreciated. The fans don't necessarily mind his style. And the players are always turning over, so you don't necessarily have to worry about people getting tired, because you've got a new crop of people coming in. Some other things to talk about. The St. Louis Cardinals seem to keep on with the injury bug. Molina is now out with a torn ligament in his thumb. It seems like he had this injury a year or two ago as well, so either the thing isn't healing quite as well as it should, or he's just putting that much stress on it. I know he's one of the best at throwing down to second base, but it hasn't seemed like he's had to do that quite as much this year. But, I mean, these are injuries that you can never tell when they're going to happen. I mean, you just grip something the wrong way, and all of a sudden you put too much strain on the ligament. It's disappointing because the St. Louis Cardinals have managed to do so well in terms of overcoming all the injuries that they've been presented with. They've been without Matt Holliday for an extended streak. They've been without Adam Wainwright for basically most of the season, although it's now being reported that he might be available to be a reliever come the playoffs, which would be a welcome sign as long as he's within his right physical framework, because you don't want to necessarily throw all the eggs in one basket and then have him get injured again and then ruin your chances for next season. But Adam Wainwright returning would be a huge boost for this club. The players are finally starting to get healthy for the St. Louis Cardinals. And they're finally starting to kind of turn it around, but they've been very hit or miss. They lost 2 out of 3 to the Chicago Cubs. They lost 2 out of 3, I believe, in the series before that. It's been a rough way here for the St. Louis Cardinals pitching, and I love Mike Matheny as a manager, but I think he tried to mess with the starting rotation too much, trying to get people rest days when they didn't necessarily need it. These guys are in immaculate shape, I think, and I don't like this whole thing where it's like, oh, we have to try to tweak things as we get down towards the playoffs. I mean, unless you have a situation where you can clearly see that guys are laboring and they're getting tired and they're not being effective, then you throw them out there and you let them do their jobs. Maybe you try to limit their innings, but to not start them at all, to me, I think was a little bit of a mistake on Matheny's part, and they're starting to pay for the price for it. I think they'll turn it around against Cincinnati. They won yesterday 2-1, come from behind victory, but still they managed to keep that score total low, and that is the key. The other thing we need to watch in baseball, the Chicago Cubs are coming around. They won 2 out of 3, as I mentioned, against St. Louis. They've got a lot of matchups against central opponents down the stretch to where they can really make a push. Probably not for the division lead. That's going to be a little bit difficult with only about 13 or 12 games remaining in the season and a 6-game difference between them and the St. Louis Cardinals. But they can catch the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're only 2 back of them. The thing that sucks for the Chicago Cubs, and obviously St. Louis fans are like, why are you talking about them? Well, this is a Midwestern show. We got to kind of spread the love around. But the Chicago Cubs, what sucks for them is as good a season as they've had. They're in 3rd place in the division. You look around baseball, and with the exception of maybe the American League Central, because they kind of jockey back and forth with the Kansas City Royals, with the exception of that division, the Chicago Cubs would be in 1st place in just about any other division in baseball. But in the Central Division, they are in 3rd place. It's just kind of Chicago Cubs luck, the way things go for them, that they have a great season, but due to the fact that the 2 other best teams in baseball outside of the Kansas City Royals are in their division, so they end up in 3rd place with a chance to overtake the Pirates, and I think that that would be good for baseball. I understand there's Cardinals fans out there with their pulling their hair out. How can you wish anything good for the Chicago Cubs? Well, simply because I'm not a huge baseball fan, so therefore I have nothing against the Chicago Cubs. My family was Chicago Cubs fans for a long time. I grew up around my grandfather, who was a diehard Cubs fan, never got to see anything good other than a couple playoff appearances. So for his sake, I'd love to see the Chicago Cubs win a World Series. Not at the expense of the St. Louis Cardinals, but just as an overall fact, I'd love to see the Cubs win. And that being said, I think it would be good for baseball for the Cubs to overtake the Pirates, have that home game at Wrigley Field. That way, at least, if nothing else, going to the future, because the Cubs have a bright future. They don't need to win this year. They could win it. They've got a good team. If they faced off against an American League team, some of the National League teams might give them problems simply because of pitching matchups and whatnot. But it would be great to see at least one playoff game this year in Wrigley Field, win or lose, because those fans have been dying for it. They have not seen anything good back since I was in college and the Bartman incident. So it would be great to see a playoff game back in Wrigley Field. Last little note, want to touch on the Rams defense. I picked on them a little bit in yesterday's edition, deservedly so. But the Rams defense is really key to go after the quarterback. That is what they've built their line around. They basically want them to pin their ears back, go forward, get after the quarterback. Well, that is why the teams that are just straight up run out of a pro formation are going to be difficult for the St. Louis Rams, because they want to get upfield, and they talked about this on the radio yesterday. And the way that the Rams set up their defense, if you have got a solid run blocking style, the way that the St. Louis Rams push forward, by the time they know that it's going to be a run play, the running back is already equal with them and probably 2 or 3 yards over that direction or that direction. So it's very difficult for the line to get any kind of stop, because they're just trying to go after the quarterback and get into the backfield. Well, if you're not running out of a shotgun set, similarly to what the Seahawks did, it's going to be difficult for the St. Louis Rams to stop the run. They do have to find a way to stop the run. They've got to figure out what looks like running plays. They've got to have better backfield recognition, see what things are going on, and the linebackers are going to have to help out in that instance. But it does fall down to the front four to really get that push and recognize run plays and stop them before they get a chance to really get themselves going. That being said, this week we're playing the Steelers. I expect the Steelers to win, unfortunately. Now, that's nothing against the St. Louis Rams, but I think it's going to be a close game, because I agree somewhat with what DeMarco Farr said on the radio yesterday regarding the St. Louis Rams. The Pittsburgh Steelers have become a very pass-happy offense, and that plays right into the strength of the St. Louis Rams defense. If you've got all your corners healthy, they're good enough to keep a decent lid on the receivers. I mean, when you're going against Bryant and his counterpart, I can't remember who's the number 2 receiver over there for the life of me now, but when you're going up against those guys, they're going to get some yards. Ben Roethlisberger is going to find the hole. But when you're a pass-happy offense, that plays right into the pass rush of the St. Louis Rams, and they are going to do a good job. They need to find a way to stop Le'Veon Bell. If you can do that, I think the St. Louis Rams will have an opportunity. It falls down to the offense. They've got to start producing something. They look great against Seattle. They look terrible against Washington. Nick Foles and the running game have got to start to find something rolling for them to get something positive going for the St. Louis Rams. But if nothing else, I think the St. Louis Rams, regardless of who is out on the field for the past 3 or 4 years, have always played up to competition. If they're not supposed to have a chance against a team, if they're an underdog against a team, that's when they play up to their potential and they potentially steal one, or at least play an extremely good game. When they're playing against the likes of the Washingtons and the Oaklands and teams like that, they seem to play down. They get too full of themselves or something. I don't know what really happens. But all of a sudden they just kind of fall off the map, and the good things don't happen. Bad things tend to happen for the St. Louis Rams team. So I think they're going to have good performance coming this weekend. Not saying they're going to win. I still kind of think that it's going to be so difficult to really contain Ben Roethlisberger for 4 quarters. But it is possible, and I think that DeMarco Farr is right. I think Pittsburgh's style is going to play right into the hands of the St. Louis Rams defense. So therefore, it's going to come down to what Nick Foles and the offense can do, especially with that running game. You got to be more consistent with that. Hopefully, maybe Todd Gurley can come back, get something started. If not, maybe Trey Mason finally gets things rolling. Something's got to go right there for the offensive line, though, and get that offense rolling. That is a view from the Midwest. What are your views on the topics that we discussed today? Comment, rate, and subscribe. Leave us a thumbs up on Facebook or YouTube. And until the next time, I'll see you then.
I remember